Hello and welcome to the channel. This is JTech. This is going to be a brand new channel primarily focused on tech reviews in the same style. So if you like what you see in today's video, I would highly recommend you subscribing for future content. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the Anker SOLIX C300 DC and see why it might just be your next purchase. Alright, so here we are with the Anker SOLIX C300 DC. We're going to go ahead and unbox this thing. I'm pretty excited to get into this thing. It advertises quite a few features and upgrades over the Anker 548, if you're familiar with that model. So it looks like this thing's really targeted more towards charging peripherals because there's no AC outlets, but I gotta say the packaging is pretty great. The only weird thing is right here we've got a car socket for 100 watts. It looks like they literally put a sticker over the original packaging. That's kind of weird. But yeah, pretty good detailed packaging. This thing comes with a lot of ports and a lot of power output. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this thing unboxed here. So thank you for choosing Anker SOLIX. Move that forward just a bit. So let's see what we get here. Kind of a weird package, to be honest. Let me slide this out of the way. What is in here? Okay. Looks like we have the instruction manual if you want to scan like a QR code. It looks like we get a 3-year warranty, but you kind of have to register that, so we'll see about that. Let me get that out of the way. Now, I did see it comes with a cable, but it looks like there's no power brick just yet. And it looks like it is 140 watts max, so that's great. I think we'll just get the product unboxed, take a brief look at it, and then we'll get into the specs and the details as we kind of go along. But here is the actual product. See if I can get this out of there. So let me move my box and trash over there. So here she is. I'm just going to set her down there, get this trash out of the way. So, like I had mentioned earlier, there is an Anker 548, and we'll get into comparing those two and as to why this model really is a huge improvement. Let me actually grab my 548 and put it right next to this one. So, this was the first lantern-style power station that Anker had made. This is the Anker 548, and this is the, of course, new C300 DC. Now this version also does come with a non-DC model. It's just called the Anker SOLIX C300, and that actually has AC outlets. I will be reviewing that because I actually purchased that one too, but that will be for another video. But as you can see here, quite a big jump from this one over to this one. Now, they are smaller, but don't be fooled by that. This actually has 90,000 milliamp hours. This only has 60. Yet this thing is actually smaller. It looks like it is wider, maybe. But the difference is not really all that huge as far as the size, but the actual capacity has been greatly improved. So let's do a quick rundown of the features here. This is, again, like the lantern style. So what you can actually do is, oh, you know what? I think we've got to do a first-time charge to actually get it to turn on. So let me go ahead and plug in some power. I think we'll do one of these. And, oh, there it is. Wow, look at that. That is pretty neat. Pretty sweet. Okay, so let me go ahead and just unplug this. If you guys aren't familiar with a lot of these devices, you have to essentially plug them in for the first time for the battery to activate. I think that's to prevent it from turning on in flight maybe while it's being shipped. But so again, the biggest selling feature for me, I think, not only is going to be the size and the capacity, but also this lantern light. So I think if we turn the front on here, we get that mode, and so it looks like there's 3 modes. It's actually an improvement over the Anker 548. So this actually has 3 different modes, and it looks like each mode feeds it 1 more watt. So that's pretty incredible. What's also great about this is it's completely adjustable. So if you want like a low light setting like this, you could set that in like a nightstand or something. If you want to like shine up just a wall like that, you can do it. I mean, you can really move this thing a lot of different ways. So that is pretty neat. I'm going to go ahead and shut that off for now. But something you also might notice is the screen. What's great about the screen is if I turn the light back on, you'll see it's drawing 1 watt, and it'll actually give you a real-time estimate of how long this battery can go with that current load. So it does cap out at about 100 hours though, so it's not going to be, you know, completely accurate. Like, you know, it's not going to tell you like, okay, you can go off 2 days, but you'll get 99 hours essentially. So let me turn this back off. We'll get into the other features. So going down the list, we've got the power button here. That'll essentially wake the screen. We've got the lantern light, obviously. We do have a reset button, which is interesting. I'll have to see what that is primarily for. But we also have a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity option here. So there is an app, but it is totally optional. It's completely supplemental. You don't have to use it. You don't have to like set up an account to go through and like register this thing. It's completely optional. Now, it's not the most useful thing in the world, but it is added functionality that really makes this worth the extra cost over the Anker 548. So going down, we've got 2 USB-A ports. I think these are actually 12 watts each. On the previous model, I think it was shared between 12 watts. So good to see USB-As here. Admittedly, there's not a whole lot you can do with USB-As this point in time, in 2024. A lot of devices require at least 20 to actually get a decent charge. If you've got like a Nintendo Switch, I think that's 30 watts. This iPad Pro here is actually 30 watts. iPhones are 20 watts. Some Androids are like 45 watts, for example, so that's nuts. Portable devices like a Steam Deck, laptop, those are usually around 45 watts or more. So not a whole lot you can do with these. These would primarily be reserved for like earbuds or headphones or like an Apple Watch like that, which is actually helping me record this video. But yeah, not a whole lot you can do with those, but it is nice to see that. Always good to see USB-As. And then we do have a car socket port, which I think is 120 watts, but as we saw in that sticker when we were unboxing it, it said 100. So we'll have to double check that, but I don't really actually have a port to test this with, unfortunately. And I had mentioned earlier, there is the Anker C300 regular one. There's no DC moniker. That one actually has 3 AC outlets in the bottom. If you're interested in reviewing that, I would, like I said, recommend subscribing. We will be covering that model eventually, but you could actually get creative and hook up one of those weird, like, cigarette to AC inverters. Just keep in mind this will be limited to, it looks like 100 to 120 watts. So not a whole lot you can do. I don't even think you can power like a PlayStation 5 or some of the newer consoles. I think they draw a little over 150 if I had to guess, but still very cool to see that. You could also use that for some of those DC fridges or mini coolers that you can put in the back of a van or something like that. So a lot of uses you can get there out of that single port. So moving on down, we've got the XT60 port. If you're unfamiliar with that, that is actually a solar panel input. So you can actually connect a solar panel directly to here. You don't have to use some weird USB-C adapter. Though you can actually use that, but you can actually use the native XT60 port. And I believe that actually recharges the device up to 100 watts, so that's pretty great. I do actually own a 100 watt charging panel, so that's great. Here we've got a 15 watt USB-C port. Good to see, honestly, but I think they probably could have left that off and given us maybe a different port, but I really don't know what other kind of port they would have been able to give us besides what we got here. Maybe one AC outlet, but I mean, that really wouldn't have made a huge difference, honestly. But it is nice to see it. It is 15 watts though, so it's not going to be able to even fast charge an iPhone, unfortunately, but there are a few devices that do, you know, take 15 watts. I mean, any device will take 15 watts. It's just, there's nothing specifically that requires 15 watts to like fast charge, for example. Like all the iPhones currently are 20 watts, so nice to see, but you know, it's not going to have the most functionality, I don't think. But here we've got a 100 watt USB-C port, and that's great. That's going to do like Nintendo Switch, Androids, tablets, iPhones, and even pretty beefy laptops. Most laptops these days, if they're just business or office work ones, they'll usually take 45 to 65 watts. More engineering level, like workstation heavy load laptops, they will typically take 130 watts. so you could still probably get a good charge out of that, but that is great to see. 100-watt charging on USB-C is always fantastic. Now, on to the next two ports, and these are the most crucial, probably the biggest headlining feature of this device. These are both 140-watt capable ports, and these do input and output. So what that basically means is you're going to be able to output 140 watts per port here. Just keep in mind though, this thing has a power output budget of 300 watts. So if you plug in two 140-watt cables to devices that can take up to that, you will literally have 280 watts going out the door. That is awesome. Just keep in mind though, it is capped at 300. So once you do that, you're only going to have 20 watts on some of these other ports to take advantage of that. So if you are planning on using both of these quite often, I don't think this will be the power station for you. You'll probably want to get like an AC inverter capable, power bank. Those are usually a lot larger and have way more capacity, because I'm sure if you use these just constantly, the battery in this thing is going to burn up. Even though it is 90,000 milliamp hours, which is great, that's still going to disappear if you are using these a lot. But what this also means, since they're input, you can charge this device with two ports at the same time at up to 280 watts, guys. That is absolutely insane. Now, it's not as good as the other SOLIX models that actually have like the AC input port where you can actually recharge them in like an hour, like 1,000 watts, but that is still great to see. Only thing is though, you have to have two different cables, then you have to have two different ways to actually push 140 watts, whether that's like an AC plug with a charging brick, or if that's like a Anker's desktop charging setup things. I can probably leave a picture on screen here, but in order to take advantage of that, you'll have to use, a 140-watt capable cable, which they do give you, but honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, we got no charging brick, and look at how short this cable is. There's not a lot you can actually do with this cable. That is pretty short, and honestly, with no charging brick, if you don't have a decent charging brick, which I hope you probably do, if you're an iPhone user, you probably have at least a 20-watt capable, power plug. That thing is going to charge slow as molasses over that. So if you do plan on getting this, I would highly recommend getting a 140-watt capable charging plug. And honestly, with how short this cable is, you might want to pick up another cable too, because this is pretty short. I think this is like 3 feet maybe, but not very long. But anyway, that is like a general unboxing of the product here. So I think what we'll move on to next is going to be, geez, I just shook the camera. I think what we're going to move on to next is going to be a comparison. So let me go ahead and grab the Anker 548 and we'll put it right next to it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the pricing on screen here. From what I remember, I think this is like $199 with a $30 coupon, so it's $169. I think this is like around $100. I'll have to check, but in my opinion, if you don't have enough money for this model, I would still recommend saving up. Even though this is still a great product for the most part, when you compare this Anker 548 to the C300 DC, it's no competition. This one is going to run laps around it all day. Really, in my opinion, unless you are really, really strapped for cash and you have to go on like a camping trip very soon and you're liking what you're seeing here in these products with the lantern light, the portable power, this is still a decent option, but comparison is always the thief of happiness. Like, this thing is just way better for a lot of reasons, and we'll kind of get into that. So on this original model here, let me just slide this puppy over. We'll take a look at this one. This is the Anker 548. So like I said, I'm going to have the pricing on screen there, and you'll be able to see how much you can get this for. It's still the same style. The prop-up lantern is pretty much identical, so you can adjust it whichever way you want. Let me see if I can actually turn this on. So it does have a screen, but this is the more old school screen they did. And as you can see here, we've got the nice display. That's going to tell us our current output. So it looks like in the first setting, we're already drawing 2 watts. And look at that. There's actually only 2 lantern settings, which is interesting. But yeah, if you actually just need a lantern light, this will be overkill, but I mean, look at that. We're going to get about 58. Well, looks like it's dropping now. But either way, if you need a lantern light, this is going to keep you going for quite a while. So the screen is still great to see, But the screen on this model is the new layout, which just is way better. We'll get more into the actual comparison or sorry, not comparison, but I think this model actually has an app. So we're going to take a look at that too. But just for now, this feature here, we have an SOS button. I think there is SOS on this. You might have to hold it down maybe. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But this one has a big SOS button, so it just starts flashing. So I'm going to turn that off. And then this just turns on the HUD, and this also turns on the lantern, like I've been showing you guys. So rundown of these ports, we do have XT60, or at least a solar input, but this is only 60 watts input. And you're going to find the biggest drawback with this model is the actual input and output rate that this battery can do. So only 60 watts in the input. Not great, but not dreadful, but you'd still want something more. I think a lot of people have 60 watt capable panels. Usually you start out with a 100 watt panel port, just being honest. And that's around $100, depending on a good brand. But looking at this model here, we've got 2 USB-Cs and 2 USB-As, which is great. I think the USB-As, though, actually share 12 watts. So they're not 12 watts each, like these ports here. You only get 12 watts shared between these. So if you plug in like a pair of AirPods and maybe like a pair of headphones or like an Apple Watch charger, they're only going to split it up about 6 watts a piece, which is enough, especially if you're overnight charging, or if you can go without your watch and stuff for a while and let it charge. But that's not a lot at the end of the day. That's not going to fast charge anything or come anywhere close to it. Now for the USB-Cs, it does get a little bit better. The in and out port, that is how you charge the device. So there's only one port that does input and output. Now these USB-Cs here, they top out at 60 watts. I think that at least this bottom one does. I think this top one does 20. The only thing is the total output wattage of this thing. I'm going to put it on screen because I'm not 1000% sure. It's either 82 or 87 watts compared to 300 on this model. Not only that, this thing is in the same form factor, but slightly shorter. And you also, well, actually, let me see. Are they actually shorter? Look at that on camera there. So they're almost about as tall once this prop-up light comes out. Interesting. But anyway, this thing can only output 87 or 82 watts at the absolute max. This is 300, guys. Now, the biggest fatal flaw I had with this model was the recharge time. This is only 60,000 milliamp hours. This is 90. But with this, like I said, we have the 280 watt capable charging input. Of course, you have 2 cables and 2 different plugs or 2 different ways to plug that in there and get that 140, but you do have that option. And you don't have to use both. You can just use one. Either of these 2 is input and output. That's how you primarily charge this unit in addition to the solar panel input. But this one, you can only charge it at 60 watts on this one port. I'm pretty sure I have this thing at completely burnout, 0%. And it took this thing, I think, maybe 3 hours to recharge. That's at least what the interface was saying. 3 hours to charge that. That's pretty bad. Honestly, pretty bad. Now, the charging performance over here is improved. Like I said, this is 100 watts. Still not fantastic. It would have been nice to see 140 watts there, but those panels aren't really too common. So 100 watt is fine. But if you are doing solar panels, these things are not really going to be charging brisk and like crazy fast over solar. You got to have a good solar setup anyway to achieve these high wattages, but 60 watts is very achievable, honestly. I would say in a backyard with like a decent solar panel kit, you would get that. Like some of those portable ones you take on the road, right? But that was the biggest flaw about this thing. We can only output very limited wattage, and actually recharging this thing just took forever. So that's why I would personally say this is going to be worth it all day. Even though it's more expensive, the features you guys are getting with this model is going to be way better. It's going to blast this thing out the door. So if you're thinking about picking up one of these, definitely this one. If you can't afford this one and you have to be on a camping trip soon, I guess you can settle for this. But if you can save your money, you don't got a camping trip coming up where you don't need a lantern light or anything, this one's going to be the best option. That is if you're not looking for AC outlets. Because like I said, you can probably hook up one of those weird AC inverters to this port here and get some decent power outage, or output, sorry. But besides that, I would not recommend this model over this one any day. All right, and we are back. So what I'm going to showcase for you guys now is going to be the app setup and a real-time demo of how exactly you can plug in devices and actually monitor it on the app. Now, just keep in mind the app is completely optional, and the app is literally just called Anker. So if we have the app open, you can kind of ignore these here. I've got 2 devices already, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the addition button, and we're going to do add a device. And I think, yeah, it already showed up. I'm going to go ahead and screen record the iPad here and put that on screen for you guys so you can have an easier time to see that. I'll probably put that in one of the corners somewhere, but yeah, so we're setting up the device. Now what's great is you can do Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Now personally, I've set up a few of these battery banks that come with this functionality already over Wi-Fi, and I didn't like it. The reason being, I couldn't figure out how to get it from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth when I take these things out to where there's no Wi-Fi. So if you're just going to use this at home, Wi-Fi is probably the better option. But for me personally, I'm just going to keep it at Bluetooth. And I think what we're going to do, looks like you can name it. Let's do, oops, my name's not J or K. J's. Let's just call it the lantern. Why not? That's like the starring feature for me. So we're going to use Bluetooth, and bam, we are already connected. So what we're going to do is right off the bat at the top, you have the temperature gauge and the overall percentage of the battery. So it says it's at 72. We check the HUD, bam, we're at 72. So if we keep going down, we can actually see total input and output. And here you can actually see the ports in real time. So what we're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to plug in a USB fan like this, and we're just going to power it up here. Now honestly, that feels great, but you can kind of imagine if you're in a tent somewhere or on a desk, on a table somewhere, maybe you're under like a tarp or something like that at like a fair or a carnival and you need a USB fan, that's going to be pretty neat to have. So we're going to let that try and calculate. I don't actually see it running here. It might actually be drawing below 1 watt. Yeah, if you guys can see that, it's actually trickling back between 1 watt and no watts. I think I can actually ramp up the fan. Okay, we'll just leave that there so you can actually see on the app. So we're at 3 watts, so you can actually see that on the app and on the user interface on the actual battery itself. So that's great. What we're going to do next, I'm going to plug in some AirPods here. Now you'll notice literally everything on the table here is almost by Anker. We've got Anker cables, we've got the Anker SOLIX, we've got the Anker app, we've got the Anker Soundcore speaker. Not an Anker laptop, actually. That one's not by Anker. So we're going to plug these in here. We see that they're charging. I'm going to wrap this over here. So we've got 2 ports in use. Now, as far as I know, my personal laptop here is about 45 watts capable on the charge. So since we're just going to do output on that, I'm going to go ahead and plug in, actually, let's plug in our Soundcore portable speaker battery for this. See if I can plug that puppy in. Where's the port for this mug? Come on. All right, so we got that. And then we've got the included cable here, which is very short, which is semi-annoying. And we're gonna plug that into our laptop right here. Not sure if you guys can hear this fan. I pointed it the other way at my microphone, so I apologize if that's very audible in the audio mix. But as you can see here on the screen, it might be hard for you guys to read that, but we are seeing about 130 watts of total output. So already we are almost double what the Anker 548 could do. And we only have a handful of devices plugged in. So that's how fast the power budget could disappear in the Anker 548. And keep in mind, we've got 3 USB-Cs and a USB-A. So this current configuration would not have worked in the Anker 548. So if we look at the app here, you can monitor it in real time. And you can actually turn on the carport and set timers, which is great. So I think I mentioned earlier, there are some like DC, like fridges or whatever that you can plug in. Maybe not fridges, but coolers, powered coolers that you can plug into this port. And this timer is great. And you can actually customize. That is actually pretty awesome. So if you want to like start up the cooler in the morning a little bit before you wake up and just have cool drinks in the morning when you wake up and not just leave it plugged in all the night, you can actually set up that timer. That is actually a pretty neat feature. I'm just going to turn that port off for now, but you can still see USB-A is at 3 watts, or USB-C here is kind of trickling back and forth. And then what's also great is you can actually turn on the lantern on all 3 settings, which is pretty neat. So I guess a good use case for that would be if you're in a tent and this thing is at your feet, you don't feel like getting up or waking someone up, but you do want to have some light in the room, you can use this app on Bluetooth. Even if you're camping, it's Bluetooth. That's going to be between, you know, your host device, whether that's a tablet or your phone, and the actual device itself. You don't need to have any internet connection for Bluetooth. That's all just done local, so that's great. So you can turn on the lantern light doing that. It looks like you can actually turn the screen on and off. For the sake of the video, I'll just keep that on. But what's also great is at the very top, it's really easy to read. You got total input and total output. And as you can see at the very, very top, we've got 2 hours and 6 minutes remaining, and we can also kind of see that here. It is laid out differently, keep in mind. You're not going to get the exact estimate in plain English like it is here in the app, but still great to see. And that is pretty much the majority features. I think there's settings we can go into. So you can time out the entire unit. It looks like that is set to 2 hours. So I think it's just going to turn off after 2 hours if you have that set. I don't know if you can turn that off maybe. Or maybe that's how long it'll go idle before turning off perhaps. That might be what that means. But we have carport saving mode. What is this? So when the car charger output port detects power below 3.5, 6 hours. Okay. So if it stops detecting adequate voltage for anything it's charging or getting charged by, then it'll just turn off. Screen brightness? Oh, so you can actually increase the brightness of the dedicated screen here. Jeez, can't speak. I'm going to keep that on low. I mean, might as well. Screen timeout, you can actually change that to 30 to 5 minutes, 20 seconds. We'll just do, I'm going to do 5 minutes. If I can get up there. So light timeout, you can set. That's great too. So you can have like a timed night light as well on the lantern. And that'll be set to never. So if you're someone that likes to sleep with the light on, if you're afraid of the dark, sometimes I am, I'll fully admit that. You can actually just set this thing's light to turn off in like 6 hours and not burn up any power. But the lantern at most took up 3 watts, so it's not going to take up enough power if you forget to turn that off. So on top of that, you can set up a Wi-Fi connection. It does only support 2.4 gigahertz though. So if you have 5G only Wi-Fi for some reason, it's not going to work on that. And if you also have issues connecting this device to a single network that includes both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, you might have to turn off the 5G band and then join the device and then turn it back on. But it's a modern device, so I can't imagine you'd have an issue with it. And on top of that, that's pretty much it here. It looks like you can restore default settings, which I think will reset the device. So maybe this reset button here on the actual unit will basically unpair it from someone's phone or like a Wi-Fi connection, and then you can reset it up in the app. That could be pretty interesting. On top of that, we actually have a firmware upgrade. Huh. So they're actually pushing out firmware upgrades for a power station. Well, I mean, it is 2024. These things are very sophisticated. They will allocate their charging budget accordingly. And there is, I don't think there's maybe a processor in here, but there is definitely something in here that will dictate which port gets more power and so on, and how to, balance out the load. So I imagine that's primarily what these firmware upgrades will be, or maybe there's some bugs or issues you might run into with the user interface perhaps, or something like that. But since there are firmware upgrades here, geez, I can't type today. I would actually recommend getting the app. It's free. You don't have to set up an account or anything. You can just sign in as like a guest. If you do plan on buying a lot of Anker products, you'd probably want to pick one up, but, get the app, but pretty good features. Not completely necessary, but pretty great. I would say if you are having issues, you can always go and set up the app and check out for some firmware upgrades if you guys do decide to purchase this device, but everything you're seeing here in the app would not be possible in the 548. That does not have any of that Bluetooth or that Wi-Fi functionality. So if we take a look at the unit here, it's pretty great. I mean, we're doing a lot of charging. We're outputting 87 watts. This would be kind of a realistic situation, I think. In fact, why don't we just plug this into the iPad itself? Because what this would basically simulate, right? When I'm on a camping trip, I've got a few things with me. Imagine this is the phone, right? I've got my phone, got a pair of AirPods. Well, actually, in camping trips, I probably wouldn't bring these. So you could actually substitute this with my Apple Watch, and that would only take like 5 watts, really. I mean, if I'm charging it overnight. I usually have a Bluetooth speaker with me, so that's realistic. And I guess maybe a fan? But this is kind of the realistic like output I would use this for at night when I'm charging devices. I mean, this is it right here. And you can see, we're going 4 hours and 6 minutes. That is pretty insane. Now, I think the iPad's actually close to done being charged. Looks like it's at like 92%. So this thing would sip down about 30 watts, which is about 10 watts more than my phone. But to give you an example, this would be kind of a realistic use case for me. So now that we have that out of the way, I think what I'm going to do, we're going to go ahead and unplug this USB fan, just get this out of the way. I think we're done with this puppy. Let me just move that to the side here. What I really want to try is actually doing some input charging. So you guys might not be able to see this, but I do have the Anker 140 watt capable desktop charger on the side here. I'll go ahead and leave a picture of that on screen from the Amazon listing, but I want to do some input charging. I think I got to change the port. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. If you are charging it, you've got to use these 2 ports. That's the only ones that can do in and out, or out and in, I guess I should probably say. But yeah, that's great. So let me actually just unplug this, and you can see in the app there, the battery capacity is like doing a nice animation. So I'm going to plug in an additional USB-C port. Now, this thing that I'm plugging into cannot do 140 watts on 2 USB-C ports. It's 140 watt max on one, and then I think, I don't know, I can't remember. But yeah, you can see we're actually inputting. So remaining charge time, we're about at 48 hours. So that's pretty incredible. Like I said, if you guys do want to take full advantage of that fast charging, though, you're going to have 2 140 watt capable cables, which are pretty cheap, honestly. If you're not buying them from Anker, they're pretty inexpensive. Even the ones from Anker that have like USB 4 speeds, they're actually pretty cheap too for what you get. The biggest problem, though, is finding a charging brick or some sort of tabletop device that might actually output that. So that would be the only issue. If you do want to charge this thing in the car, you'll probably want to bring like a car charger with like a cigarette lighter or any way to actually charge this inside the car. That would be pretty neat. If you guys do want to get a solar panel kit, be wary. This actually only takes between 11 and 28 volts, which from what I could read or gather without doing a whole lot of research is actually pretty limited as far as the voltage goes. So you might have to check your solar panels and see if they're actually compatible with this, because Anker's solar panels and charging ports, I think they're known to take lower voltage. So just keep that in mind. If you want to achieve that full 100 watts, you might have to do something weird to get around that limitation, but that's what you can do if you want to recharge this thing solar powered. Honestly, you take this thing out on a camping trip, you bring a solar panel kit, this thing's never going to die on you as long as there's decent sunlight, honestly. If you don't need it during the day, that's a prime opportunity to charge it. At nighttime, you got to power some lights, you got to charge some peripherals. This thing's got it. This thing's got a light on it, so you might not even need lights at that point. So this really is kind of an all-in-one device. As you can see here, we're at about 70%. Our remaining charge time is about 42 minutes, and we are outputting about 56 and 63 watts respectively. Our total input is about 119. So pretty decent recharge times. With the 548, it would have taken probably at least 3 hours to charge that thing from 0 to 100% on that single 60 watt input port. So this is a huge, huge step up. So there is one other thing I wanted to include. There is actually an optional strap here. It's really weird though. I'll admit, I got this thing in the early bird pricing period, so I did get a slight discount. Pretty slight, actually. I don't really think this thing's much above the early bird pricing anymore. But if you bought this during that period and you applied the coupon, you actually got the strap for free. Now the strap is pretty neat, honestly. It's got Anker SOLIX all over it, and it looks pretty nice. The strap is comfortable. It's $30 if you want to buy it separately, but honestly, the way this hooks up is pretty great. So you've got the hooks here, which is, you know, substandard, but what's neat is they actually include these hooks on every single unit. So you don't have to buy these separately. If you already have your own strap, literally as long as it can interface with this or hook into it, you're golden. So if you want to get the strap, I think it's nice. I don't have the ability to use this thing for a few months. This thing's only been out for maybe 2 months, I think. But from what I can tell, this is a reliable strap. It looks quality. It's built nice. But if you have your own strap, I wouldn't even spend the extra $30, honestly. Unless you really needed this thing to be portable and you like what you see in the strap here, you can pretty much ignore it. I just got it because I had it for free. So that's pretty much a real world use case demo. That's if you're charging stuff at night at a camping trip. Now, there could be a lot more vigorous testing done with this. I will fully admit that. I just don't have the opportunity to do that. If you guys wanted to test this, I don't have a port for that. I don't have the ability to hook up a solar panel kit like that. It's pretty cloudy out today, unfortunately. But if you guys do want a more in-depth demo on how exactly this thing will perform, odds are you'll probably have a better time finding that on another channel. Just being honest. So if you guys want to see, you know, this thing really put to the test, then you might have to go elsewhere, unfortunately. But this thing is pretty freaking sweet. So let's go ahead and wrap up the video, and I will be right back with you guys. All right, and that just about does it for the first video on this channel and the review for the Anker SOLIX C300 DC. Overall, there is no reason to get the Anker 548 anymore. This thing is a true sequel in every sense of the word. Everything has been improved. The lantern's better, the size is better, the output is better, the amount of ports is better, and the app functionality is also great too. Not completely necessary, honestly, but great to see. So with the price being so similar, I don't think there's really a reason to get the Anker 548 anymore. This really is the new model. I would not be surprised if this thing actually ends production or goes on a pretty big sale soon. I think they'll probably just want to sell all these out and just focus production on the new C300 because effectively there's no reason to get this thing anymore with the price being so similar. Now, this is not a perfect product, mind you. If you're someone that needs AC outlets and more capacity, this is not going to do it. This is really like a companion device. This is what you'll use for a lantern light, charge your peripherals, that sort of thing, laptops, tablets, phones. That's really what this is geared to, is portable peripheral power, honestly. But there is 2 products in the C300 lineup now. There's the DC and there is the non-DC, literally just C300. But what this does is it's got the same capacity, but you do actually get 3 AC outlets. You do still get a few USB-C ports. So overall, this is not a direct upgrade. This is actually a different product that is a little more expensive, but it does offer a few different features. And you'll notice the light here is a bar light, not a lantern light. So that could also be pretty interesting to check out too. So what we'll go ahead and do is if you guys liked today's video, go ahead and subscribe and leave me a like. If you didn't, give me a comment and let me know what I can do to improve the content. And for those that you will check out the channel in the future, stay tuned because this will be the next video. Thank you and have a wonderful day.